Hello. All right, folks, we're going to get ready for the panel if our panelists will get ready. All right, so first I just want to reintroduce our panelists. We've got Rebecca, Sarah, Benno, and Alex. So our first panel question today isn't this, it's what's your favorite Chupa Chup flavor?
Watermelon.
I'm going with Choco Vanilla here, apparently.
Strawberry.
Cola.
Well, as you can see, we have a diverse set of opinions here. So it's going to be a really interesting panel. All right, so our first question is, how can you encourage a development culture that values security and privacy?
Is this on? Yes. Okay. I didn't know if it had a button or not. I think I'm not from a dev background. I was a network engineer before I was a security person. I think the best way to encourage security culture in a dev environment is to not sort of see, like, have dev team, security team. Like, you need to kind of be, it sounds really cheesy, I know, but like be collaborative and actually have conversations with each other and all of that stuff. I know that sounds cheesy, but let's be honest, that's actually what we should be doing. I found like having just conversation and not being sort of critical, because something that seems really obvious to a security person, a dev person may never have had to think about. And so if you go across all patronizing, you know, it's all, I think the battle is psychological rather than technical. Yeah.
Okay, I think I agree. I think it's easy for like dev teams to see security teams as people who just say no a lot and force you to do things that you don't want to do. Like, you have to go fix this thing instead of making the thing that you want to make. So I think if you can like give the dev team some sort of way to see the value of the things, of the security things that they're doing, then they'll be a lot happier about it, and so will you, because they'll do it more.
For me, I agree, I concur. Empathy is a really, really important thing to have, especially as a security tester going into these organizations. It's very easy to sort of see where things are on fire, and you can very quickly lose perspective on, you know, developers have conflicting timelines and challenges, like they have to meet the needs of the business, and there are probably security things that they know of, but the business just aren't giving them the resources that they need to actually fix these problems. And the second thing is that we as security practitioners need to get rid of this idea that our users are stupid. Not just developers, but in every department, because as Alex said, I forgot what you said. It's very late in the day, I need a nap. But it is really important to not treat them like they're stupid, because you as a security person should be helping encourage and training them up to recognize problems and sitting down with them and enabling good security choices.
So yeah, just to be different, I agree with everybody. I think the other thing that, especially that you get in larger organizations, is you need to make sure that your structure that your structure encourages that kind of thing as well. In a previous life, I was a consultant, and I got sent into a couple of large financial institutions. And what happened was the security team had hired us to come in because they felt that the development team that was in a different sort of managerial silo were never listening to what they were trying to tell them, so that the security people could protect the large amounts of money that the financial institutions were looking after. And the reason why we got hired was because as a consultant, you can cut across reporting lines. And so what we were essentially hired to do was to arrange a meeting with the security people and the development people, put them in a room and say, now, I want you to tell them what you feel you're not getting from this relationship. And so I think this kind of, it's a very similar kind of thing to the previous siloing that you used to get, or you still get in some cases, between development and ops. And so people found out that if you tear that down and make these people collaborate, or even like start smearing the job descriptions together a bit, you started getting things that we now call DevOps, in whatever form people do it now. But that got you, assuming you were willing to make the communications work, that got you a whole bunch of positives. And I think that there's a similar thing that needs to go in terms of security, where you kind of merge that in a similar kind of way. It involves improving communication between the people whose job it is to look after the various things and making sure that those people are all aligned.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like security therapy might be a new industry we need to
I used
look
to refer
into.
to it as corporate marriage counselling.
All right. Our second question. Why should I use a password manager?
Because it's a good idea. No. So I use a password manager because, as I showed in the start of my presentation, passwords have a bad habit of ending up on haveibeenpwned.com. And the way that you avoid that becoming a disastrous event versus an annoying one is you use different passwords everywhere. My memory is finite. And so I need to keep track of those passwords. And so a good password manager means that I can have a separate password per service and not have to worry about forgetting all of them.
Any other opinions?
I think I'm just going to be really controversial. I actually agree with everything that's been said. I think it's actually really good advice. And it's true. Like, password managers help you have like harder to hack passwords, right? And like I use one, and lots of people in this room probably use one. But I also think it's okay if you don't want to use one, because some people, like, if you personally in this room, if you come up and tell me that you don't want to use a password manager, that's okay, and I will not fight you about it. If you don't know what a password manager is and you say, I don't know and I don't want to know, then like, whoa. But like, there are some people who like don't care enough about security to like go for the extra like not confusion, but like the usability cost of having a password manager. Like people who are like not very technical, right? Or like people who don't really know how to use a computer, right? Like, should we tell them to use password managers? It will increase their security, definitely. But like, maybe it'll decrease their ability to use a computer, right? Like, they might learn how to, someone might set them up with a password manager, and then they'll like not know how to use it when they want to log in and look at their email or whatever they do. And so like, I think it's everybody's choice. There are some people who like, their like technical skill is like not as good as ours. And so for them, it might just make their life overall better to just use the same password for everything, or whatever it is that they want to do, or write their passwords on paper or whatever. It will definitely make their life less secure, but overall their life might just be better than like fiddling with a password manager and getting phones and all that. So I think it depends on who you are. What do you think?
Seems like there's consensus. Yeah.
I'd just say, yeah. I mean, there are some people who, I'm thinking probably like my grandparents, sorry if you're watching this on YouTube, I know you will be, who, you know, yeah, it would make their life a lot more difficult. Like, it's not feasible. I think I'd probably just expand on that and say, in your personal life, I think you should choose. I think in an enterprise environment, and if you have the kind of job where you're using multiple passwords, like all of us will be, I think you should be using one. I think I'd probably distinguish between enterprise and personal.
Yeah, that's a pretty important distinction to make. Do you have any comments, Beck? No?
I think you should use a password manager, but I agree with Alex. If I had to get my like 80-year-old dad to use one, there's no way, because I'm going to become the tech support for that. Do not want to deal with that.
Yep, it always comes down to tech support and usability. Here's a bit of an odd question. Is it possible for free platforms to remain free and utilize data ethically?
Well, all those Facebook adverts around town at the moment. Well, that's not free. Well, it is free, isn't it? Yeah. Facebook is truly trying to convince us through all those ads around town at the moment. I guess it depends how you define ethically. Like, we're going into that. Yeah, you can. I nearly did law. Can you tell? Like, I think it. Me, I'm quite, for a security person, quite chilled out about, I just kind of accept that social media platforms, etc., use my data, and the price of me using stuff for free is that they do various different things with it, because that's their business model. Personally, it doesn't bother me so much, but I think this kind of depends on your tolerance of those kind of things, because I think, like, the fact is that free platforms have to generate you know, they have to get income from somewhere in order to run. And, you know, if someone can come up with a business model that doesn't involve selling some kind of user data, they're cool, but I don't know what it would be, and I'm not going to sort of suggest I know how to fix that, but I think it's just the price you pay. I mean, I quite like the idea of like Facebook, Instagram, whatever, social media platforms, like having maybe a ad-free, we don't use your data, like pay us a couple of dollars a month. I've heard that be bandied around, but I don't know if people would pay for that. I probably would, but I just accept that this is the status quo at the moment. So
Yeah, I think it depends on like what is motivating these people to make these free platforms, right? Some people will just make some free service or some free thing just because they want to, just because they want it to exist. I've done that. But like, sometimes people will only make a thing if it lets them make money, or they'll make it for a while and then they'll be like, well, if I want to keep making this, it will cost me too much money, so I need to get money to make this somehow. And so like, one of the ways we've solved that, or one of the solutions to that, is to use advertising or use the data that people are giving you, or just charge for it. And so I think if people can come up with some other way to get money for their platforms, like, I don't know, some mysterious shadowy organization just donates money to us and we make this website, then like that seems reasonable. That seems like they don't have to use your data to do that. If there are any free shadowy organizations out there, you know, maybe you can use that to help us keep our data more safe. I don't know.
I'm not a huge fan of using services that use my data in shady ways, but I still use Twitter because I really like Twitter. But there are new services like Mastodon that are coming out that people can run up their own instances. You can run up single instances that you retain all the information and only you can use. So if you're really not into organizations using your data, you do need to also consider what services are available, and those are becoming limited because people can't just bootstrap free, fun, exciting services like Twitter without incurring some sort of cost or something like that. So I think, as Sarah said, it sort of depends on what's available and how you're looking at it. It's a very personal question. And it also depends on how much you actually read privacy policies and things like that in terms of services. I think it's a hard question. If it wasn't possible, open source wouldn't be as it is today. But with that said, you do need to make money in some sort of way, and a lot of services like ProtonMail charge you a fee, and some of that money generally goes towards helping run free instances, or they put limitations, and I think those are much better models, but they're not sustainable for every company, especially if they, you know, just want to make a buck off you.
I was just spending the time there trying to think of a free platform that I could think of that was not doing the kind of data ridiculousness that we expect out of Facebook and whatever. The only one that really came to mind was Wikipedia. Unless someone's going to tell me that Wikimedia is secretly collecting everything and selling it off. But the thing is that, you know, the price for Wikipedia being free is that you have to get all those donation nags every once in a while, because, as you know, the core point here is somebody needs to pay to keep the lights on, or rather the site on. And so for a for-profit organisation, you pretty much need a monetization stream, and the most obvious one that's out there is being free, unless you want to do a kind of freemium model. I'm thinking GitHub here, or ProtonMail is the other example, where the people who pay subsidise the people who don't. But yeah, I think it is possible, but it's only possible if you've baked that into your model from the beginning. I find that most of the sites that have started out going, we're free, we're free, we're free, oh God, how do we pay the bills, tend to start selling off all their data pretty quickly.
Yep. All right, so this is going to be our last question of the day before we wrap up. What can ordinary citizens do to protect their privacy from governments introducing controversial legislation?
Burn it all down.
Live in a submarine.
That's tricky. I mean, obviously, the trouble is that any defence that you're going to use, if the government, if say certain potato-like people were to be in positions of power where they decided that they didn't like what you were doing to protect your privacy, they can just legislate it to now be illegal. I think paradoxically at this point, we're kind of hoping that large organisations like Apple stand up to this kind of stuff, which they have done. The problem being with that being that you don't want to place all of your eggs in the basket of one large corporate monolith. Really, I think the best thing that you can do is not only get angry at what they're doing and then get active, as in lobby your local MP, vote for people you believe have your best interests at heart, that kind of thing. But start working out how to educate your friends, your family, possibly strangers on the street, but be aware of adverse reactions to that, as to why this stuff is important. Because the trouble is that the government can bring up something as banal sounding as the Accessibility and, sorry, is it the Access and Accessibility Act of 2018, and everyone will just go, oh yeah, the government needs access to things. And if they start to dig into it, the government will say, oh, it's just like the existing stuff we have to do lawful interception on telecommunications. What's that? Oh, it's tapping phones. Oh yeah, you do that already, that's fine. But actually, if you look at the stuff, it allows them to issue notices to companies like Apple saying, please install malware on this device so we can read all their mail. And the trouble is that at the surface, Jay Random on the street isn't going to realise that that's necessarily what's going on. And so you need to point them at expert analyses of this legislation to show where the danger points are. You need to explain to them why it's important that they get angry about this, and you need to actually get them to start being active as well. Because the only thing that politicians listen to in rough order are votes at the ballot box and the number of angry calls they've received on a particular piece of legislation. So if you can't ratchet one or both of those in the right direction, then they're just not going to listen.
I'm going to be that person and just point out that if the government, like, sort of sidestepping controversial legislation, if the government do want to tap your phones and gain access to you and all of those things, they can. Because we've all, well, most of us, and you can go and download these. You can go find the NSA playbook, and the technology isn't beyond us to be able to do these things. But as you said, like, to help everyone, you do need to go and legislate, and you do need to talk to people, and not in the sort of righteous, I know everything about security, these are the ways you need to do it. You need to do it in an encouraging and safe way for these people to understand that you're not tinfoil hat, and that, you know, you just want to make sure that they have the same rights and protections as anyone else. And we are moving into a very sort of rocky time in politics. And yeah, it's our position as security professionals and people with digital knowledge to go out of our way to help people improve their security postures, especially against government legislation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can do some things with computers if we don't trust our governments. We can, we can use Signal to encrypt our stuff and use Tor to encrypt our other stuff. But like at the end of the day, if like the government wants to see your secret stuff, you're going to have a bad time because they're the government of the country you live in. And I mean, they're the government. You're just one person and they are the whole country and stuff, They have a lot more money and time and motivation and stuff to do their, I don't know, sinister spy stuff or whatever. But the good news is probably none of us are interesting enough to the government to warrant any of this, unless anyone has anything. We hope. Unless anyone wants to tell me some cool stories later. So, yeah, I think there are things you can do. There are computer things you can do to try and protect yourself from governments who might be interfering with you in some way. Maybe in a mass way, that's fair enough. We might all be maybe none of us are interesting, but we would all be subject to anything that affects everybody. That's true. And there are things you can do against that, like encrypting all your stuff and encrypting all your other stuff. But I don't know if the government infringing on your privacy is a problem, and it sounds like it is a problem to a lot of people, then maybe it's the kind of problem we should solve using something other than computers. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm not going to say anything different, really. I'm just going to concur that I agree that if the government wants to look at your stuff, if any government wants to look at your stuff, you're screwed. They're going to look at it. They'll find a way to do it. And I don't think this can be solved with as Alex was saying, I don't think this is something you can solve with technology. I mean, sure, you can go and encrypt your stuff, you can do this, you can use Tor, you can do whatever, but they can still, like, you know, the governments have far more capabilities if they really want to look at you. I guess you either take, well, there's a couple of approaches. You make sure you're not interesting enough that they want to look at you. But I think, yeah, the bigger thing is making sure that, you know, you pay attention to what governments are actually trying to introduce legislation-wise, and helping other people who don't understand technology and digital stuff as well as people like us do, understand what exactly these things are. Because I think this is me slightly tangenting, but I think generally in politics, you know, I think a lot of people if you take sort of the general public, I think people are very kind of relaxed and they always say, oh, this doesn't affect me, unless it very, very directly affects them. And I think, yeah, what we have to do is help people understand, you know, actually what some of this legislation is about. So if people don't agree with it, they can, you know, petition your MP or whatever it is you need to do, because that's really the only thing you can do to actually stop this stuff being, you know, put in place in the first place.
I just want to underline something that was said a bit earlier, is that when you're going about doing this kind of activism kind of thing, because that's really what it is, it's really important to not treat the people you're trying to educate as being idiots. I just want to really underline that. Because one of the people that you could try and educate is your local MP. If you can get FaceTime with your local MP, with your state senators, all those people, that's the kind of person you could say, look, I really want the government to take my privacy seriously and stop trying to find ways to get into it just because they feel like it. Like, stop trying to make it so the police can get access to my health records with it just whenever they feel like it. But you need to be able to do that in a way that actually makes them listen to you and makes them take you seriously, and you can't do that by coming across as an elitist or just, so, you know, don't be an idiot is not a phrase that you really should be uttering in those kind of conversations.
Rally together, get your friends, call your MPs, and opt out of my health record.
Maintain the rage.
All right, gang, that has been our security and privacy panel for today, and it's also been the first security and privacy track that's been run at PyCon. Ooh. So can we have a big round of applause to our panelists?
Can we have a huge round of applause for Eliza and Chris?
We also have to thank all of the AV people who've run around and helped us get everything working, including my laptop and its dodgy dongles. Now, we're finished a little early, but there is a great talk in the DjangoConf track by Lily that you should go and check out at 20 past. In the meantime, you've got a couple minutes to amuse yourselves.
And by the way, if you don't have dinner plans tonight, downstairs at 6 o'clock, people are going to be meeting up. There's also Slack and Twitter, which are quite active if you don't have anyone to have dinner with. Everyone wants to make friends, so be friendly.